Hello everyone watching at home, you're with Sarva McClinton from Adelaide Eternal, bringing you another 7-minute 7-point series deck tech. Right now, we're bringing you a brew that has actually flourished. It has come to the surface of our testing, and whilst most of them end up on the cutting room floor, they just can't compete with the tier 1 decks, this one can tango. It is a mono black control list, and what is a Highlander deck without an awesome, hilariously ridiculous name? I call this deck Call of DT Black Obs. I mean, there's DT in it, and there's technically a divining top. And there's actually two Obs. There's an Ob Nixilis and a Phyrexian Obliterator. Now, jokes aside, this deck is seriously no joke. It can actually really compete very well. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 5 categories of cards in here and how the deck works. So, first of all, you have your essentially control package. So this here is what you have to hinge on, because you don't have counterspells. You know, you're a control deck that's not blue. So Thoughtseize, Inquisition, Duress, all these in the early game, and then you've got Brutality, which plays multiple roles, including creature removal, and life gain against burn, and Him to Tourach, which gets you value. You've also got Liliana that plays multiple roles as well, being able to sacrifice a creature. And then, of course, this powerful card, Mind Twist. Often you'll find that because you don't have as much ramp, and by ramp I mean a single card over here, we'll talk about that later, you're often playing this on curve. So, you know, you at 4 mana, you'll be doing X's 3. But the main reason it's in here is against the control decks. So your anti-control package is great. You're able to really deal with things like the Grixis control deck, and they have to answer the cards like this. Now, against creatures, Highlander is fundamentally a creature format, so you need to be able to interact with things like Deathrite Shaman turn 1, killing any dorks, and you need to be able to deal with True Name Nemesis. So Diabolic Edict and Gatekeeper of Malakir let you target an opponent to sacrifice, and also To the Slaughter does the same thing, Liliana the Veil, like we said before, and Toxic Deluge to wrath away those elf dorks, as well as True Name Nemesis. So you have a lot of ways to deal with the problem. The other problem that you have is usually Planeswalkers, which is why To the Slaughter is in there, and Heroes Downfall main deck. But oftentimes you can peel them out of the hand, so get rid of that Elspeth before they ever get to play it. The other thing you have problems with is enchantments. Boompile's in here. If you haven't seen Boompile before, it's actually really cool. It's 50% of the time it's better than Nevinyrral's Disc, because you don't have to wait to untap. Having your disc get Rexaged or Kazali Pride Maged is really frustrating, but being able to activate Boompile straight away and have a 50% chance of destroying everything is pretty good, and by the next turn, odds are it will have operated the same as disc. Ob Nixilis is in here as well as your destroy creature most often, but he's also a threat against control because he basically lets you draw a card every turn, which brings us to our card draw selection. So we have Sign and Blood and Night's Whisper, which are often played on turn 2. Make sure you hit your land drops, you are a control deck. And Dark Confidant if you're not against the creature decks, otherwise he's just going to be blocking because you can't afford the life loss. And Skeletal Scrying is really good in this deck. If you haven't played this before, most of the time it's going to be an ambitions cost, so X is 3. But against control decks, you can play this at instant speed at the end of their turn for a large amount, just like a Sphinx's Rev. They have to counter it, otherwise you're untapping and playing those cards. But either way, they counter it, you force that action, then you get to untap and you get to land one of these big finishes. So we'll talk about the finishes here. Batterskull and Kalitas are vital because they have lifelink. If you could fit in any other lifelink in here, it'd be great, but it's really, really hard. The deck is quite tight. And then Phyrexian Obliterator is one of the most push cards, and that's why it's BBBB. Demonic Tutor lets you find all the key pieces when you need one of the 4 different packages, but also it lets you find this key piece here. Now, this is a budget deck, and I've said before, when you're looking at a budget deck, you're really looking at, 2 colors. But here you get the privilege of playing a single color, a whole bunch of basic swamps, you don't get wrecked by Back to Basics or Blood Moon, and you get to play a card that is arguably better than Back to Basics and Blood Moon. It's Contamination. This literally tells your opponent that they can't even tap their lands for mana. So they don't even get a 1 use out of Back to Basics, they don't even get to use basics. they can't do anything. Now, you aren't a deck that really has the ability to play recursive threats like the raid guy, the 2-1 raid guy, because you don't have a large number of dudes, which is why we don't have Umezawa's Jitte in here, and this isn't Wasteland, frustrating as it may be. We are control. So what you do is you can hinge on any of these 4 cards here to generate value, which allow you to keep your contamination around for multiple turns. And you'll be surprised. You can do it off this and the cards to find this and so on. You'll be able to survive with keeping a contamination around for quite a while. And even if you get to play it and you just sack a Geralf's Messenger twice, so you kept the contamination around for essentially 3 turns, you've actually stopped your opponent from doing anything for 3 turns, which is fantastic. And you get to just take over the game from that point. But if you have a Bitterblossom, you're laughing. This is a hard lock. Now, we have Dark Ritual in here. It looks out of place because you are a control deck. You don't want to be having card disadvantage. But Dark Ritual turn 1 into Necro against a control deck is hilarious. And it's also just really good, if you play Dark Ritual into one of your other 3 drops. So against an Elves player, I've done this, turn 1 Dark Ritual into Liliana the Last Hope, and then minus their Dork, and then for the rest of the game they can't play Dorks, they have to play slowly. And because the game is slowed down, you're ramping this guy into its ultimate, and they can't really do much. It's fantastic. So Dark Ritual is in there for that, as a nod to that. The 4 fetch lands are in here, and they're the only non-budget concern, but they're really not integral to the deck. This is like $60 and this is $40, I think. So you can just play basic swamps if you want, but they mainly trigger the Revolt on Fatal Push, and also Vengeful Rebels. So Vengeful Rebels Revolted is actually better than Skewed and Render, aside from the counters aspect, because you can actually just play this by itself and threaten control decks. And then you have a small selection here. If Near Deadlands is really cool. It stops Kitchen Finks and stuff, so they don't come back. You get main deck Graveyard Hate because you can afford 2 tapped lands in here. Everything else is untapped. And then you've got a couple of colourless lands here. They also happen to play Thought-Knot Seer, as well as ensuring that you can interact with your lands. So, Blighted Fen and is same as, if Near Deadlands, it's ways to interact. Strip Mine's in there, as we said before, because it should be Wasteland, but we have 2 points to spare. In the sideboard, we have our anti-creature package. You get to play Perish, Damnation, and Mutilate, and your creature matchup post-sideboard is hilariously good. Against Control, Bloodgust there is great recursion, gets to bash them, and also trigger Contamination. And Wrenchmind is another hand disruption spell. Fulminator Mage pairs up with Strip Mine to destroy their lands, and also comes back off Liliana the Lost Hope, and Phyrexian Arena, again, another threat. This is your anti-Graveyard package, and then anti-Storm package. Trinisphere is, totally playable, and this is really good against a lot of combo decks. So if you like the look of it, sleeve it up, tell me what you think. It's a whole lot of fun, and have some fun playing some Black Obs.